of Full Trade Show was a fantastic group of entrepreneurs, lots of small businesses there. I think the conversation we were talking about was so fascinating. We were focusing on rethinking retail, which is obviously a huge thing to be thinking about, right? What is happening in today's marketplace? How can we be pivoting our businesses and really thinking about new ideas? So today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to build a winning fashion brand. And many of you guys sent in some great questions over the last week or so, and I'm going to be excited to answer those. Also, if you guys have questions today, in reference to your businesses, your brands, this is certainly your time, right? So I'd love to be able to open and extend myself out to that. Okay, so just to kind of recap a little bit about what happened during yesterday's event and kind of the big highlights, right? So one of the things that I thought was really fascinating is obviously these days people are launching businesses left and right, and I really blame Shopify and I really blame Silicon Valley for making people think they can launch businesses without having strong branding, right, and having a strong brand identity. So as we know, guys, ease of entry to marketplace doesn't dictate or make it certain that you're actually going to be successful, right? So to really build a winning fashion brand, right, we really want to start to think about how your designs and your product can stand out in a sea of competition, right? And how is it that you can start to differentiate yourself? And so one of the things we talked about yesterday, which I think is so valuable, is to start to think about niche marketing. Oftentimes, guys, when we're launching businesses, we try to think about how we can democratize the product and get it in front of as many different people as possible. In fact, I was just looking at a business plan for a very well-funded company, and none of the people on the team really understood branding, right? They understood, product and retail and numbers, but they failed to understand the emotional communication and how important that is to translate through all of your marketing materials. So what's interesting, guys, is it's not necessarily your product development, right, that's going to make you stand out in a sea of competition. It's really going to be your branding and your messaging and how you're getting in front of your customer, which is going to help you stand out in that sea of competition. So this was a very open-ended question that I was sent over to me, but I think it's very valid, right? How do you make your designs stand out? So remember, it's not about keeping your actual design standing out. It's about keeping your branding and your marketing and making sure that stands out, right? Because that, in essence, is what is going to redefine you. Right? Okay, so the next question I got is, how do I toe the line between products that grab attention and products too unique to sell well commercially? I love this question. It's such a good question. Okay, so when it comes to creating products that get attention, right? Oftentimes in fashion, we need to be thinking about things in terms of editorial products. So the editorial products are similar to runway stuff, right? So when we think about runway, we think about, I remember when I used to be at Gucci, and I took that $50 million business and turned it into $100 million in about 2 years. And trust me, that was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But I remember looking at the runway shows and being like, that is not going to sell, right? That's not going to sell. This is going to need to be adapted in terms of being ready for the retail space. So as you guys are thinking about what is editorial, and then what is actually consumer driven, you need to ask yourself the following questions, right? Number one is your brand, are you trying to get in front of a huge demographic? Are you trying to sell to a wider audience? Or, right, are you really focusing on selling to a very unique, hyper-specialized audience, right? So one store that I love is the Henrik Vinskov boutique in Soho, right? And that store, Henrik himself makes this crazy art. It's very creative, and they intentionally only buy from brands that are creating really unique products that grab a lot of attention and that are really just there to make a showpiece, right? And those products sell because that target demographic is looking for those kinds of products. So if you're a brand and you're going, okay, I have all these big creative ideas and creative visions, my question for you is, do you have an outlet or a channel and a vehicle by which you're planning on selling those particular ideas? And so what I would say is start to think about things in terms of editorial designs, and then also in terms of, mass market. Can you create something that is going to grab people's attention? So press is going to write about it, right? Maybe it ends up being limited edition. Maybe it ends up being something that you sell to celebrities or do some celebrity gifting with. But then you have a more mass kind of commercial version of that product, right? And that's the product that ends up being sold at boutiques because they have a financial investment to make, right? And because they don't want to end up with a lot of products that aren't going to sell. But again, it really varies on who that boutique is. And so again, a Henrik Vivskov versus, opening ceremony, which also does very high unique products, but also it's a little bit more wearable versus, let's say an Oak, which is like also very wearable, right? So you're starting to see some different tiers of distribution points. But I do think it's totally worthwhile to be thinking about brands, products that do grab attention, right? So if you do want to be provocative, this is the time to do it. I recently, I think it was last month, I did an event, co-sponsored an event with Condé Nast, and we were talking about how important and how great it is to have your brand stand for something. And in a sea where people are afraid of being politically active, or they're afraid of losing business because of, not fully standing and saying what they mean, actually your consumers are looking for you to be meaningful. Your consumers are looking for you to be provocative. They want to identify themselves with you. And so while on the political side, that might mean a little bit of a risk if you're not willing to really put your beliefs out there and your brand isn't such that it communicates in that way, you definitely want to think about, how your brand can stand for something. And I think that also kind of helps with this first question about how do you make your product stand out. It's really how do you make your brand voice stand out and take a stand for something, because people want to be a part of a tribe that is meaningful, right? Okay. Next question here. Oh, just to kind of wrap up that other question about unique products that grab attention and products too unique to sell well commercially. So if you are going to create something that is less commercially viable, right? Meaning something that is like a one-off here, it's experimental, you're unsure about it, don't buy a ton of product, right? It's like, why would you make that thing and then like buy a bunch of inventory in it? Even if it's gonna cost you a little bit more money, because you're not going to be able to produce at scale. So a little bit more money, maybe you lose a little bit on the margin. I would much rather you have a high sell-through of that product collection, sell out, and then rebuy it, than to have you try to take a couple points off of, the price point or the margin for yourself to make more money and end up with a lot of inventory that doesn't sell. So sometimes it's worth it not to always buy things at scale, especially when you want to just test them out, right? So think about, commercially viable products in terms of testing, and how you can invest wisely in that experiment. Okay, guys, the next question I got was, how does the process of reaching out to buyers for e-commerce shops differ from traditional store buyers? Okay, so what's interesting, so I managed to listen to a little bit of the talk that happened after me yesterday, and it's the guy who I think is the head of UBM. I don't remember exactly. It was like something, he was some bigwig, right? And he was talking about pitching, and he's like, you gotta walk into the store, and you gotta meet people, and you gotta get them to get to know you and talk to them. Well, how the hell are you supposed to do that in an e-commerce environment, right? It's like virtually impossible. So in an e-commerce environment, when you are looking to pitch these retail buyers, obviously, number one, you want to be on their newsletters. You want to know what they're selling. You want to know how they talk about their brands. You want to know what kinds of marketing activities they actually do. So is there an opportunity to do collaborative marketing, co-op advertising together? Understand your e-commerce channels. The other thing that's important, guys, is to make sure you're not overly distributed online. So everyone wants online businesses because there's very little overhead. However, if you are in too many places online, then all of a sudden you're going to have these retailers be competing for the SEO search, right? For search engine optimization, for your brand. And so they're not going to like it, right? Because they all kind of want to show up as one of the first few shops that are carrying your product, especially if you're a small business. So I would say it's extremely critical to think about your online distribution points really carefully. You know, what are the doors that you want to be selling online? And is that going to be cannibalizing your e-commerce business yourself? You know, and if you're a small company, chances are it won't, right? But you do want to make sure those distribution points are well selected. Now, when you're reaching out to these buyers, of course, you want to get an idea of what brands they're selling. You want to get an idea of how they talk about their company, you know, what their social media strategies are like. Definitely make sure that you craft your emails in such a way where it lets them know that, you know, you are intimately understanding what their business is about, you know, and I think that that's very important. So when you're crafting your emails, you might want to say something about how you love their last few campaigns and how you love how they're leveraging these influencers or they're doing these collaborations, or how, you know, you love the assortment planning or the merchandising on the site, right? So you certainly don't necessarily have that same opportunity to go inside the store, but you can certainly speak to those things. Lastly, I would say when you're pitching e-commerce, especially the smaller boutiques, remember that a lot of them, especially the small guys, are small teams, right? Kind of like you, right? Some of you guys are, you know, doing millions of dollars in business, but you're still only like a 5 or 6 person team, right? Or maybe a 3-person team, right? Or maybe you're reaching your $50 million marker and you were able to do so off of a group of 10 people, right? So remember, we are running very lean companies, right? In the same year that Kodak went bankrupt and laid off like tens of thousands of people, Instagram got bought and they for like $1 billion and they only had 13 employees, right? So we're used to small teams being able to generate lots of revenue. So when we think about, you know, pitching these e-commerce buyers, I would say certainly direct message them through Instagram, you know, let them know that you are interested in working with them and collaborating. You love to send them a line sheet or some samples, and try to find them on these platforms that they're also actively trying to get in front of their customers on, right? So I think that's a great idea. All right, guys, if you have questions, please feel free to leave them below in the comment section. Otherwise, I have a few more that were sent over to me, and I'll just keep working through them. So the next question I have here is, should I start off going for wholesale accounts or scale up later? If I should scale up later on down the line, when's the best time and why? Okay, so here's what you're gonna find, guys. As a small brand, it is very difficult to gain traffic organically online, right? Organic traffic is very hard to master, and the reason why it's so difficult is because there are millions of websites that are out there. There are so many e-commerce shops that are popping up all the time. Chances are, even though you might think your product is so unique and special, there are other brands out there that are ranking for those very same keywords, right? So you're in a huge sea of competition online. However, once you do establish that channel can become a huge volume driver for the business, you know, and I think that that's a very important thing to consider. So you certainly want to invest in e-commerce early on with the understanding that it might take some time for you to start to see a huge ROI, right? But it doesn't mean you want to skimp out on UX, UI, you know, it doesn't mean you want to skimp out on development, copywriting, branding, like all that needs to be super tight. Just know that the traffic, the sales, and all of that is going to come through longevity. Google indexes websites and keeps track of how long they've been around. If they've been around for a long time, it'll add more credibility, right? Google and other search engines are also looking to see who else is linking back to your website. You know, so getting that digital marketing going and that digital press is going to be very valuable. So it is largely up to you in the beginning stages of your brand to be able to establish your e-commerce platform, start the way you want to finish, and then know that it's going to take a little bit of time as you establish those backlinks, as you optimize your website, etc., in order to get that organic traffic. So this question here, should I start off going for wholesale accounts or scale up later, should really be reframed as, you know, should I start wholesale? Should I only focus on wholesale, or should I only focus on e-commerce, or should I do both? My answer is both. excuse me, I do believe you should do both. And the reason why is in wholesale, it does take about, a couple seasons of pitching, right? Hardcore pitching, in order to really start to see some traction, right? Because people want to get to know you. You're laying the foundation. You're inviting people to your party and they don't know who you are. So I would say start off with wholesale and e-commerce at the same time, right? Even if you're mostly focused on building your wholesale accounts, your e-commerce is going to be where your brand comes to roost, right? This is your brand hub. This is what people are looking to experience from you, right? So it is very, very important that you still have a great, robust e-commerce site. Now, as far as wholesale is concerned, the biggest issue that I find with people who start off with e-commerce and then branch off to wholesale is they have not done the foresight and the planning to understand how price points and margins get impacted from that, right? And so what does that mean? Well, if I'm going from a markup, if my product is $5 and I'm selling it on my website for, $15, right? Well, okay, I'm making, a $10 profit off of that. But if I'm trying to sell that to a wholesaler, right, well, they're gonna say, all right, you're buying this for $5, I'm gonna mark it up, buy it at wholesale for 10, and then they're gonna, say, mark it up to 20 or 25. And so you need to be thinking about your price point strategy from the beginning. Not launching e-commerce assuming you're only gonna do direct to consumer. We just don't live in that kind of world anymore. The world we live in is very much omnipresent, right? Brands are everywhere. And I really don't like the word omni-channel, but you guys catch my drift, right? It's like your customers exist in real life, digitally, and in person and direct. So definitely price point, understand your price points in the beginning stages of launching, right? And plan your price points out accordingly, right? Super, super critical. So I would say do e-commerce, do wholesale, plan to have that execute at the same time. Make sure that you have the right bandwidth to take on both. And if one has to take precedent, well then focus more, like make your e-commerce platform more of like a brand destination and like a brand hub, and then focus more on getting the wholesale accounts going, because with wholesale, it takes time to bridge those relationships, right? Your site will be benefiting from whatever action, activity, blog, SEO stuff you have running. And then at the same time, you're gonna be laying the foundation to build these relationships with your wholesale accounts, right? So do both. Okay, last couple questions. How can I expand my brand to other markets without reaching out to showrooms or reps? You can certainly take on expansion yourself. It's gonna require that you have an in-house salesperson. Oftentimes I meet startups and they're like, I'm doing it all myself, it's just me, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, if you're doing everything yourself, you're setting yourself up to fail. You just are. There's no way to successfully do this all yourself, because it takes a lot of vision, it takes a lot of bandwidth of work in order to get an idea off the ground. And so you need someone internally who's going to be managing sales. You need someone internally who's going to be, handling your pitching and having those dinners with those people that you maybe don't really want to have those dinners with because you'd rather be designing next season, or you'd rather be working on your financial projections, right? So you need someone who's going to kind of play that role in the business. And so I think expanding to other markets, no, you don't necessarily need a showroom, you don't necessarily need an external rep, but you do need someone internally who's going to help you drive and understand your brand and the nuances well enough to be able to drive those communications in whichever markets you want to be into. So it's very, very important, guys, that you don't think about this in terms of, I have to do it all myself, right? It takes more than you. All right, next question. For apparel, is there a standard pricing strategy for direct-to-consumer and wholesale? And if not, how do we begin to formulate this? Okay, so what I like to do when I think about pricing strategy is first I take a look at the market positioning, right? And I take a look and figure out who are my brands in my space, right? how are they pricing themselves, and what are they doing in terms of price points by category? Is my branding on par with their branding? How do I differentiate myself? Is this a aspirational brand, luxury brand, etc.? So first is like segmentation. Then once you do segmentation and you develop a ideal retail price, right? Then I would take that ideal retail price and I would divide that between like a 2.2 and a 2.5, right? I would take that retail price and then divide it and say, okay, this is the approximate wholesale price that I'm going to be selling the collection for. Now, once I have that approximate wholesale price, your goal as a brand is to get your cost price in as low as possible while maintaining your brand values so that you can actually make that margin between your cost price and that wholesale price. So in the beginning stages, sometimes your wholesale price is running up against really tightly your cost price because you're not able to take advantage of scale, right? And that's oftentimes an issue that you have. However, you do not want to change your external perceived pricing and value by playing funny business with your wholesale and retail pricing as you're able to scale your company, right? Your customer is going to be like, oh, well, why are we paying this much now and then prices are changing? Like, I don't understand. Why couldn't I get this price in the beginning? Like, you don't want to disrupt pricing. Now, for a company like Everlane, which is like great on transparency, really smart, understands, that's like their core branding, right? It's like, how much do these things cost? Well, for them, when they took their, I think it was like a cashmere sweater or tank, they brought that down by $25. They turned that into like a PR pitching story, right? They said, hey, we are getting better pricing now for our cashmere. We're going to give you guys the benefit of this discount and this deal that we're getting, and we're going to make this add value to you, the consumer, right? But that was very strategic, and that was on one product. This isn't like, it wasn't like they just changed all their pricing without having a reason. They turned it into a PR activity. So that is kind of the way that I would start to look at pricing, right? It's like you have your market value, perceived value, branding. Does your branding match the market? Does it match your pricing goals? Then work backwards to create wholesale, and then work backwards to find out, what that cost price needs to be. Generally speaking, your cost price needs to be at least, right, 2 times, right, between cost and wholesale, at least, right? But sometimes you're going to find yourself not being able to make even that kind of markup. And again, in the beginning, that's okay. If for whatever reason you found out from your manufacturer that you have no wiggle room on your cost price, and even if you scaled because of the technology and the techniques that you're using, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of scale, right? So if that's something that you ended up finding out, then what you would want to do is say, okay, well, do I need to change my branding, right? Because I know this product that I'm passionate about, this technique, this strategy that I'm passionate about is not going to, I'm not going to be able to make any money, right? So at the end of the day, guys, while we might be doing good things with our business, we are still running businesses, So if you find out, all right, this is the final pricing and I'm not going to be able to do much with that, right? Then I would say from there, you need to go back to, okay, if pricing can't change and I'm really committed to this, I need to change my branding and I need to change my brand voice and positioning in order to be able to make a profit off of this particular product, right? Or collection, etc., right? Or you find another manufacturer, right? Long answer to a short question. Okay, so I have one other question here, guys, and then I'm going to sign off. This question here is, how do I get a better understanding of my target customer? That's a very loaded question, right? It's like, how do I get to know my customers? Okay, so your customers you are so welcome. Your customers exist in lots of capacities, right? Your customers are at those markets that you're selling your product at. Your customers exist online. You can find out more about your target customer through doing some, ethnographic research, meaning going to where your customers go, participating in those Facebook groups that they participate in, and not as a brand, but as a, person who's a part of the tribe, right? So you want to start understanding, if you are not your customer, right? And you're pitching to an outside customer and you're interested in grabbing that market share, then it becomes really critical and important that you have a strong idea of what they want. And so sometimes in the beginning stages, I often advise and work with clients on doing focus group research. You know, like, let's get those micro influencers together. Let's get people into a room. Let's see how they're reacting to your logos, to your collection, right? Let's not just make a bunch of assumptions and waste a ton of money. You know, let's actually be intelligent about this. So I think it's a great idea if you're just getting started and you have the startup capital to be able to do focus groups, you have the startup capital to be able to do something that is really going to give you the most feedback. Don't rush to put your stuff to market. Don't rush to get it out there. In fact, take your time, get the research, get the understanding, build up these customer profiles with real data, and then develop the collection, develop the branding, and go for it. You know, I think that it happens just so often, right? It's like most brands start with an idea, then they try to build a logo around it, and then they just push it to market. But guys, fashion and retail, like fashion is not like a technology company. If it works, it doesn't matter. We all assume a shirt is gonna work, right? It's gonna go over my head. You know, so like there isn't like I gotta make sure that that algorithm works, or, you know, that like it actually computes the data or compresses these files or does whatever tech thing it's supposed to do. You know, in fashion, it is not about shoving it to market and testing it. It is about crafting brand vision and voice, right? And then taking that voice and pushing it out there, right? So, all right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. You know, what I end up doing with these Instagram lives is, well, thank you. What I end up doing with Instagram lives is I record them, they get pushed back onto our YouTube channel. So if you guys do come to the Scaling Retail YouTube channel, you'll see tons of previous Instagram live sessions, other videos, lots of really cool content. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And we do these every month, so I'll be back for more. All right, talk to you guys soon. Bye. I will do this more often. Bye, guys.